Hello YouTube, this is Johnny Ringo, and today I'm making a response to a buddy of mine, a fellow YouTuber, the Anti-Bright, with his video, My Philosophical Grievances with Veganism. Link will be down in the description. Now, I want to say first off that I largely agree with many of the criticism that the Anti-Bright made in his video. And I wanted to, it inspired me to make my own assessment of vegan arguments and veganism and what I think of those arguments. In my view, vegans tend to assign a hierarchical system, a very arbitrary hierarchical system, where all life has value. And yet, somehow, vegans appear to almost have no desire for the continuation of human life. Have you noticed that? Now, I'm not saying all vegans, obviously. I'm not making an argument from generalization here. But I've seen many vegans who appear to just fucking hate their humanity. And I don't exactly understand why. It's weird. They care so much for animals that they believe have comparable levels of intelligence, comparable levels of sapience, sentience to human beings, but they don't seem to have much compassion for other people. It's not surprising, but it's still paradoxical. It's still inconsistent as fuck. It's still arbitrary and emotional, and vegans really don't do themselves any favors with the more extreme of them who have this very anti-humanity, anti-homo sapiens stance. And I find it really weird, because they approach their humanity in this massive amount of guilt, much in the same way that like an evangelical Christian would. The difference between them being that while a Christian would say, "Oh, I'm sorry for being a sinner, Jesus, I know I'm a piece of shit," a vegan will say, pretty much, "Oh, I'm sorry that I have to eat in order to live. I know that I'm a piece of shit. Please forgive me, nature. I'm sorry." And in that way, with the overlap between the vegan community and the pagan community, of which there is a great deal of overlap, there is a spiritual anthropomorphization, a spiritual assigning of a divinity, assigning of a divine intelligence to natural forces. And I mean, sure, when you go back through the history of religion, you go back past monotheism, you get into polytheism, where in the later polytheism, people, attributed their gods with human facets, things of human intellect. Artemis became the goddess of virginity and of the hunt, and Apollo was the god of the sun, and you could use this as symbolism for man's intelligence, man's coming to enlightenment, man's continuing education of themselves. But when you go back further through the beginnings of polytheism, the gods were less about human traits and more about natural forces, especially when you go back even further into animism, the most beginning of human spiritualities, to where everything which was a natural force was considered to be divine. As if everything that was in nature had a spirit, the spirit of the rocks, the spirit of, the stream, the spirit of the mountain, the spirit of fire. And eventually, as time went past, then we just started having gods of fire, and they started gaining their own names, So in that sense, humanity has always applied traits to the world around them, applied these traits of divinity. Vegans do that too. This kind of thing is most common in a vegan concept called deep ecology, where there are these kinds of ideas like, for example, a very old forest is given a name and is almost apotheosized by that name. They're often referred to as old growth forests. But I've seen videos of vegans praying to the old growth, crying, begging the old growth's forgiveness, begging forgiveness for their humanity, really, for being a piece of shit. So in the same way that an evangelical Christian, a very extreme Christian, especially if that Christian is obsessed with, say, the Inquisition or the European burning times, a very extremist Christian might resort to flogging or whipping themselves as an act of penitence, much in the same way that people did during the Inquisitions and the Crusades. See, the act of eating in order to survive is a sin so terrible in the vegan community that it's really not hard to see why a vegan would just hate humanity on principle, why a vegan would just wish that we all would be dead, that we all would kill each other. And yet, what's interesting to me is that when vegans make the argument, and this is really my main problem with the vegan community, is not just their hyperactive agency detection device, as Daniel Dennett would call it, where we have this urge to just ascribe awareness and sapience and sentience to everything around us, which is how we came to understand the concept of a God. Dennett calls that the hyperactive agency detection device, because we are detecting in our minds agency, and then we are assigning agency to everything around us. I think vegans do the same thing. And when they say that, literally everything on this planet is just as aware, just as conscious, just as intelligent as a human being, I think that is the vegan hyperactive agency detection device. And I don't think that they know it. I really don't. I don't think that a vegan is aware that they are assigning agency unduly, incorrectly, to things that they should not be assigning agency to. Because there is a difference between these concepts, say, of sapience and sentience. Now, essentially the idea is this, that sapience is intelligence, sentience is awareness. Not every living thing on this planet has both. Not everything on this planet has sapience. Not everything on this planet has sentience. Not everything on this planet has either of these things. So to me, there is a very clear distinction between some animals that have sapience and sentience, and many others that merely have one or the other, and many others that have neither. That's fine with me. I would say, for example, if I were to give example of a few kinds of animals that I think possibly have both sapience and sentience, I would say cats, I would say dogs, I would say dolphins, and I would say most primates, most kinds of primates, orangutans, gorillas, chimpanzees, sure. I have no problem with saying that these animals possibly have both sapience and sentience. But for people to lump all of these creatures together, all of the life that is on this planet together, and say it's all the same thing, it has all the same awareness, why? Well, because Gaia, because Mother Earth Spirit. Now, as a former pagan, I used to believe that shit. I will be honest. I used to believe some really stupid fucking shit as a pagan. And like I said, with the overlap between the pagan community and the vegan community, these ideas are very common. Even in non-pagan vegans, to where these ideas have become so common that they're just accepted. They're just accepted without thinking about them. They're just accepted without critical thought at all. But see, in all honesty, sometimes I wonder if vegans are possessed of their necessary critical thinking faculties, or if they're simply following a religion. Because I have talked to many vegans, and I've gotten into many arguments with many vegans. I have not met a single vegan who can prove to me that every single living thing on this planet has the same amount of awareness and the same amount of intelligence as a human being. I defy any vegan to prove that to me. And it would be very easy to prove. For example, one of the traits of beings that have both sapience and sentience would be the ability to either learn or formulate their own method of communication, for example. And that's why I say that it's possible that apes and dolphins and cats and dogs have both sapience and sentience. I don't know that for sure. People will say things about, oh, you know, my dog will talk to me, and I will talk back to my dog, and whatever. And they'll say that about their cat. But is that really happening? Because we can't decipher cat meows or dog barks. Those have no meaning to us in our language. What we are doing is assigning meaning to these things based upon, 1, our imagination, 2, our emotional connection to the animals that we love, the animals that we're caring for, the animals that we're having a mutually beneficial, symbiotic, emotional relationship with. Now, I have no problem with that. I love animals. I really do. I love animals a lot. Particularly, I love pit bulls as the dog species. I think it's a great species of dog. I've helped my mom, and I've learned how to help my mom raise pit bulls. And there's so much fear surrounding pit bulls, and they get such a terrible reputation in the media, and people are terrified of pit bulls. And they say, well, you know, these are just killing machines. Well, no, they're not. Pit bulls are not killing machines. I guarantee you that a pit bull raised properly with love and affection and with proper training and proper socialization very early on in their lives. And you should be taught how to properly raise a dog. Not everyone knows. And that's the thing that pisses me off, is that not everyone knows how to properly raise a dog. Just like not everyone knows how to properly raise a baby. These things have manuals for a fucking reason, and you should be using them. Christ, it's not something that just fucking comes natural to people to raise animals or to raise babies, for that matter. I love animals. But that doesn't mean that they have the same level of intelligence that I do. If one of my mom's dogs barks at me, I might wonder what that means. I might try to interpret what that means. And based upon my previous experiences, I may be able to say, oh, I'm pretty sure that bark means that he's hungry. But that doesn't necessarily mean that. And if I put food in front of him, he could just eat in order to eat, because there's food in front of him and he'll just eat it. Doesn't necessarily mean he was hungry. It doesn't necessarily mean that I have deciphered what the dog was trying to say, because I don't speak dog, and a dog cannot speak English to converse with me. And that is, for me, that is the defining characteristic of how I would determine sapience and sentience within a human being. Which is why I'm not sure that the 4 animals that I mentioned definitely have both of those traits, because these animals cannot communicate in that same manner. I mean, I don't know. I'm not a primatologist. I've never met Jane Goodall. I can't tell you, for example, that the sign language that they teach primates is accurate, because I don't know it. I don't know anything about sign language. I want to learn, American Sign Language with deaf people, and I am aware that primate sign language is different from the human sign language that deaf people use. I am aware that there's a difference there, but I don't know either of those signing languages. So I can't determine for sure that any of these animals have the same degree of sapience and sentience. But see, for a vegan, there's no difference. There is no difference. A vegan doesn't understand the difference between sapience and sentience because a vegan doesn't care about the difference between sapience and sentience. A vegan does not care to back up their arguments with scientifically provable, repeatable, and testable in a laboratory fact. A vegan does not give a fuck about fact. A vegan gives a fuck about their emotions. Most vegan arguments are emotional. And so, when a vegan tries to argue that an animal has the same consciousness, the same intelligence as a human being, when they use that word consciousness, it's a very vague, not quite properly defined word. We don't exactly know what consciousness is. Ask any psychologist, they're not fully sure of what consciousness is. They would define consciousness as anything which is like a human which is breathing and operating and thinking and feeling and perceiving the world around them. And that non-consciousness is simply a cessation of these processes. But that's not how a vegan uses the word consciousness. That's not the context in which a vegan will use that word. A vegan will use the word consciousness in any fucking context that they think will suit their argument. And that's part of the problem. Because a vegan will twist the world around them in order to fit their emotionally based arguments. If they can use it in context to mean anything they fucking want it to mean, if they can use that word consciousness in any context they want, then the word consciousness has no definition really, and they are cheapening the definition of that word with their bullshit. Which is why vegan arguments are so scientifically inconsistent, because they don't give a fuck about being scientifically consistent. They give a fuck about how this shit makes them feel. And that's the crux of their argument. And then they say, oh, well, you're being a piece of shit because you don't agree. Well, that doesn't mean I'm without compassion. And just because you're basing your arguments on emotion does not mean that you're the compassionate one and I'm not. Now, in Anti-Bright's video, he mentions a study that he read. I would like to read it. I've never heard of it, but he mentions a study that he read where a plant will have some kind of reaction to being eaten, to where the plant would try to avoid that in some manner. They try to have some kind of self-defense mechanisms to avoid being eaten. Now, I've never heard of that, and that's very interesting, which is why I would like to read the study. I would also like to question Anti-Bright if he knows whether or not this study was peer-reviewed. That's very important to make that distinction. I don't necessarily know that plants do this, but on a vegan standard, the very idea that a plant would take any measure to defend itself whatsoever to them denotes the same human intelligence and the same human awareness. I disagree very, very much. And I remember years ago where I had some disagreements with the Vegan Atheist, a popular atheist vegan YouTuber, who gave shit to Mr. Repsion and gave shit to TJ the Amazing Atheist for not being vegans. He's a vegan proselytizer. He's an evangelical vegan. He gave them shit for not being vegans. And when TJ brought up an argument that the reproduction rates of domesticated animals that we use for food are higher than animals in the wild, and we could actually theoretically increase the populations of endangered species by domesticating them for food. This argument that TJ made has been, in recent times, backed up by Dr. Jean-Francois Garipi, who is a French-Canadian biologist. You may have seen me with him on the Pimp Monk show a few times. I don't necessarily know what his background in biology is. I think he does shit with primatology. I'm not sure. But he said that it's very conceivable, and it's within, there is evidence to suggest that certain species of animals have, to use JF's words, recruited us for their biological reproductive strategy. In other words, he is backing up the argument that animals use us to increase their reproduction. I don't know if that's true. A vegan might, again, argue that that means that they're just as smart as people are. I disagree. Let's imagine for a second that a plant is completely sentient and sapient like a person is. Why the fuck would you eat it? Like, see, and that's part of where the vegan arguments start falling apart. Why do you eat plants? Why do you eat anything at all? If you believe that everything on this planet has the same awareness and intelligence as a human being, why the fuck do you eat? I can't even fathom that are, like, so it's okay to eat plants, but it's not okay to eat animals? Why? It goes back to the vegan's emotional argument. Because it's fluffy and it's cute and I love it and I don't want it to die. Okay, your compassion notwithstanding, what other reason should I not eat it? You don't have one. So, if a vegan is eating plants, then on some basis they have to admit that they don't think that plants are as aware or as intelligent as animals or as humans. But when I tried to broach these subjects with the vegan atheist, he wanted to try to prove veganism correct by sending me to some article written by some doctor, and literally, like, I think the end of the first sentence of that article had the word speciesism, and I just fucking, oh, Jesus Christ. So here this supposedly reputable doctor is accusing people who don't agree with him of speciesism. You're a speciesist, you fucking sick piece of shit. As if that word has anywhere near the same connotation as something like sexist or racist. You're a speciesist, you fuck. If someone said that to my face, I would probably laugh. What do you mean? What does that mean? I'm a speciesist. I'm a person who believes that what? That some species have more value than others? Well, yeah, maybe they do. I don't know. I'm also a philosophical fallibilist. I don't know for sure that everything on this planet is equal in its importance or equal in its value in a utilitarian standpoint. I would love to believe that every person on this planet is of equal value, equal intelligence, and of equal ability to contribute to the advancement of the human species. But I don't know that for sure as a fallibilist. I don't know that for sure. I can't say that with confidence. And just because I would love to believe that, because it would make me feel better as someone who tries to embrace optimism, just because that thought would make me feel better does not make it true. And that's why I think that to a very large extent most vegan arguments are just emotional in nature. These are emotional arguments. Let's say that a plant does defend itself from harm. Why does that have to mean intelligence equal to a human being? Why can't that be a simply ingrained, programmed biological process? Why does that have to be a basis of intelligence? How does a vegan define sapience or sentience? Like I said, I'm pretty sure it's whatever they want it to be for the purposes of that argument without context. How would a vegan be able to differentiate between a simply ingrained biological process that is an automatic response by nature of being that living thing It is innate to that living thing, this biological response, which is completely involuntary. How do they differentiate between that and signs of intelligence? I don't think they can, because I don't think they know how. But when a vegan makes that declarative claim, when they make that value judgment, that declaration that yes, this pea pod is just as intelligent and just as aware of a human being. Are you suggesting that a pea pod should be given the same rights as a human being? A vegan will say, well, everything has a right to live. And like the Anti-Bright brought up, I don't know what the fuck a vegan thinks they mean when they say everything has a right to live. A right as defined how? How do you define that right? As opposed to a privilege? Do some things have the right to exist and other things don't? Which things don't have the right to exist and why? Or does everything have the right to exist? How do you determine what that is? Who says that everything has a right to live? According to whom? According to what? A vegan has never answered my question. Who decides that everything has a right to live? I don't think even vegans know the answer to that question, because on a certain level, I think that they just declare it so because of their emotions, or they think, well, it just has to be. Every living thing just has to have a right to live. According to who? Given by what? What factors give a living thing the right to live? If everything is given the right to live by the simple fact that it is existing, then it's not a right to live. It simply is. So if it's not a right, and if it's just the fact that everything that lives is living, which is a statement that I would agree with because it's a statement based upon an observation of reality, everything that exists, exists. Everything that I perceive to exist, exists. But I don't know, because apparently a vegan really, really emotionally needs there to just be some stamp of approval that says, yes, this little mulberry tree deserves to live. This, or a bush, or a fucking ficus. I don't get it. Like, how do you determine that? How do you determine it? I think it's just arbitrarily said by vegans. I mean, I'm a secular humanist. I really care about human beings. I am a humanist to a fault, to the point of not being correct. I would rather be a humanist and be wrong than be correct and be a piece of shit who does not value human life in any way, shape, or form. But even as a humanist, even with my strong dedication to human life, I'm not sure that human beings have a right to be here either. Because I don't know what a right to live is. I don't know who decides that everything or everyone has a right to live. I think we're just fucking here. And we better make the most of it. I don't believe in a God. I don't believe in some divine intelligence that has imbued us with not only life, but the right to live. I don't believe in those things. And many vegans would, if they were pagan vegans, if they have that overlap with the pagan community. But even in a theological sense, I'm baffled at how deeply vegan arguments are without philosophy and without scientific basis. By the metric of a vegan making a declarative statement about which deserve to live, they are also by omission making the same argument about which lives don't deserve to exist. And therein lies a major philosophical problem. How the fuck do you decide who deserves to live and who doesn't? Let's consider for a moment, if we will, the time, the money, and the effort that goes into making organic vegan food, the organic pesticides, which are in some ways more dangerous and more cruel than any pesticide made by Monsanto. These organic pesticides kill bees, They kill insects by the thousands, if not millions, all to protect this precious organic vegan food, because they believe that it's better to eat plants than to eat animals. What about insects? Now, some extremist vegans will say that, yeah, insects have the same level of intelligence and awareness that a human being does. Then you can't justify eating organic food, because the amount of insects that are killed in order to protect the sanctity of organic vegan food is too much. It should be akin to mass murder so that you can eat. And that's exactly what people who accuse people like me who eat meat of doing. That's exactly what vegans accuse me of. As if I'm Hitler every time I put food on the table. Which is fucking insane. And therein lies part of the biggest problem with veganism, is that vegans honestly and truly believe that they are anti-cruelty. They're not. They just have a different definition of cruelty. They just are selectively cruel toward insects, and not toward the big, fluffy, cute animals that we love so much. Now, I have heard arguments, and I could find studies from evolutionary biologists who said that we evolved to eat meat, that we are a predatory species partly because we have front-facing eyes and sharp incisors. You can see the same sharp incisors and front-facing eyes in wolves, for example, in lions. If that is true, and if those evolutionary biologists are correct, then by those traits, we are predatory animals too. Now, this brings a very interesting question to my mind. If we are pieces of shit, let's say, for sake of argument, that human beings are predatory animals. Vegans will make the argument over and over about how human beings were not evolved to eat meat. Evolutionary biology disagrees with you, but then again, some of these are pagan people who believe that we didn't evolve. So these are anti-evolution vegans who try to make the argument that humans are not predatory species despite predatory features, in the same way, for example, that a trans-exclusionary radical feminist will make the claim that the brain isn't gendered, that there are no biological, neurological differences between the brains of males and females, therefore transgender people don't exist, because you can't, in their minds, transition between one gender or another, that are lies. So, vegans have that same argument, that same rationale, with their claim that human beings are not predatory. And to be perfectly honest, I don't know for a fact that we are predatory. I can't say with certainty that we are. I can only say that I have read evolutionary biologists who say that we have predatory traits. But you know, these same evolutionary biologists are the people who say that Homo sapiens sapiens, modern humans, and Homo sapiens neanderthalensis evolved to eat meat, that they had to eat meat because meat was one of the only ways in which they could get the caloric intake they needed to survive, and the caloric intake that over millions of years, or in the case of human beings, several 100,000 years, would have led to the increase in the human brain, especially in the frontal cortex, the increase in the size of the human brain as humankind evolved. I don't know that we needed meat in order to survive. They say they do, and I'm not trying to make an argument from authority, but plenty of evolutionary biologists say that we needed to eat meat in order to survive. Theoretically, early Homo sapiens sapiens could have been completely vegan from the start. Only we never would have gotten out of the agricultural age, and we never would have, it would have been detrimental to our species to have the Industrial Revolution. It would have been completely detrimental to our species if we had evolved from a vegan predecessor. And according to those same evolutionary biologists, not only would the human brain have been smaller, and we would have been possibly less intelligent, but that the surviving population of humankind would have been smaller as well. I don't know that these things are true. These are things that evolutionary biologists say. Go look it up for yourself. These are things that I've looked up. I will continue to educate myself as I go. But let's imagine something. I have a moral, philosophical question for vegans. Are you not granting special rights to certain life, as the Anti-Bright said? Let's imagine this. Because I do agree with most of the criticisms of vegans about the meat industry, and so does the Anti-Bright. The meat industry sucks, it's needlessly violent, it's needlessly cruel, it's really fucked up in a lot of ways, and I am all for, and so is he, we are all for complete reformation of the meat industry to a much less cruel, much less violent, much safer, much more compassionate way. Because I'm a human being and I have fucking empathy. But I think that a vegan takes the human concept of empathy too far. Let's imagine we have a predatory animal like a wolf. I love wolves. Let's imagine we have a wolf. That wolf chases down and kills a deer with its pack. Now, if all life is equivalent to the intelligence and the awareness of human beings, why are we not trying to arrest that wolf pack for murder? Why do we not treat every group of animals in the wild as separate communities of the same people, deserving of the same rights and the same legal considerations as human beings? I tackled this question back in a video way back on my channel, Apes, Sentience, and Veganism, where I was reviewing one of the shitty Planet of the Apes movies with James Franco, where I said that yes, if there was some way to make apes to the level of the intelligence of humankind, to where they had the ability to communicate using the English language, or using some other form of communication that they developed that they could teach us to use to communicate with them, yes, we would have to legally, ethically, morally, philosophically treat them the same as us. We would have to give them their own community where they could live with us in peace. We would have to stay away from their land. If super evolved, super intelligent apes happened, they would be a country unto themselves, and they would take part in human politics. They would take part on the world stage as a new country of living, intelligent, sentient, communicative beings. But that hasn't happened yet. And if it did, the moral thing to do would be to treat them like humans. Where I disagree with the vegans is I don't think that has happened yet. I don't think apes are at that level. If we take the vegan argument into consideration and we accept temporarily the idea that every living thing on this planet which hunts has the same awareness and the same intelligence as human beings, then every predatory animal on this planet is a murderer who deserves to be locked up. Why don't we do that? Well, number one, because we don't have the fucking space to lock them up. Number two, it's fucking insane. Because really, at the end of the day, when a vegan thinks about it, they really don't believe that every animal on this planet has intelligence and awareness comparable to that of a human being. Because we don't do those things, and they don't advocate for us to do those things. Where are the vegan groups advocating that we need to arrest predatory animals and put them in jails? Where are the vegans advocating for that? It's stupid. It would be fucking retarded to advocate for that. And vegans don't advocate for that. Because on some level they're aware that their beliefs are just stupid. But they believe them for emotional reasons. A vegan has to believe these things for emotional reasons. which is why veganism is less an ethical way of living your life and more almost like a religion, because they have that same denial of reality. They have that same denial of philosophy, the same denial of science. And in this way, veganism is also denying the law. It is denying almost every facet of reality around us. Why isn't every vegan on this planet reduced to a sobbing mass on the fucking floor every time they inadvertently step on an insect? Why is every vegan on this planet not volunteering themselves to be arrested every time they have something to eat, no matter what it is? If everything has the same intelligence and awareness, you should be begging to be locked up. You should hate yourself. A vegan should kill themselves, because every vegan, every time they eat, should perceive themselves as a mass fucking murderer. A vegan should be begging to be locked up or commit suicide if they really believe their beliefs, to the point of a religious fanaticism in the way that so-called true Christians would. If they were really serious about their beliefs, that's what they would do, but they don't do that. Now, to close this video out, because I know it's been fucking long, and I'm sorry, but I hope it's at least been interesting, I do agree that we could eat less meat. And I think that a compassionate person, if they knew that the cost of them eating meat was too high, a compassionate person could, theoretically, of their own volition and of their own free human choice, decide to eat less meat, or not to eat any meat at all. And in that way, in that basic way, a vegetarian and vegan is exercising some level of compassion. And I have no problem with that. As far as the subject goes, I am a libertarian with it. If you believe that you should eat less meat or no meat at all, go ahead and have at it, bro. Go ahead and do that. I have no problem with you doing that. But the problem becomes when you go from a libertarian vegan who lives and let lives to an evangelical vegan who proselytizes about veganism constantly in the same way that my retarded little brother proselytizes about fucking Hillary Clinton. If you are a proselytizing evangelical vegan who believes that it is your moral duty to force everyone to become vegans like you, then you're a piece of shit. Fuck you. Fuck you in your ass, motherfucker. Honestly. Because it's the same as some religious fanatic. I don't mind if you want to be a religious ascetic and deprive yourself like a monk of things that you hold dear because you believe there's some virtue in it. Have at it. Go ahead. But the minute you start telling me how I'm supposed to live my life because of your fucking beliefs, you're no different than the Westboro Baptist Church. You're no different than fucking ISIS. You are a terrorist. Which is why in the 80s, most of the terrorism that we had in the 80s were from left-wing radical groups, the Earth Liberation Front and Animal Liberation Front, who, according to the FBI and several law enforcement agencies, are classified as terrorist organizations, period. And PETA is almost at that level too. The extremism within PETA almost has the United States government and the Southern Poverty Law Center almost can classify PETA as a hate group, as a terrorist hate organization in the same way that they classify the Earth Liberation Front and the Animal Liberation Front in that way. This is the growing extremism of the vegan community, which is why those motherfuckers were the ones blowing shit up in the 80s. And in a way, the Anti-Bright gives you fucks more considerations than I think he should. He gives you more considerations than I would give you, because he says that we should eat less meat. But my question to that effect is, according to whom? According to people who are denying reality, according to people who, some of them, are engaging in terrorist activities. Those are the people who say that we should, declaratively should, eat less meat. No, motherfucker, I would if I was given the choice. And I would 100% of the time prefer my meat to be taken from local, ethical, practically sourced, realistic places that do not use factory farming, which do not engage in unneeded slaughter, who are not excessively cruel to animals. Yes, I would prefer that my meat comes from there 100% of the time. I'm not going to require that, though, because I'm not a fascist. I don't believe that I know what's best for other people. You motherfuckers do. That's the difference between you and me. I'm willing to live and let live. You motherfuckers can't stand people who are different from you, and that's what makes you extremists. By definition, that's what makes you extremists, because you feel that you have the right to tell other people how to live. Fuck you, motherfuckers. You don't have any philosophy. You don't have any concept of the relativity of certain moral arguments, how these arguments are based on people's perception and based on their definitions of words and based on how they see the world around them. No, you take how you see the world around you and you declare it as fucking vital, as gospel, as this is the way it is, and that's just it. You're no different from Westboro. Fuck all of you vegan motherfuckers. And of course, you love your argument from nature fallacy. Well, it's all natural, then it has to be good. Gwyneth Paltrow does that bullshit. And that is the same way. One of the reasons why I left the community of paganism, all of the different pagan communities, was because of how easily they were duped into literally goddamn anything. People who make entire livings selling you bullshit. Snake oil. Oh, this is a potion to give you guidance for your life. Oh, just buy this and put it in your window. Here, $35, please. Oh, yeah, this is a specially made dream catcher made by Native Americans, and it's supposed to, give you messages from the universe and help you realize your dreams. That'll be $50, please. Because you motherfuckers can be duped into anything. You get your shit from people like Merkala. You get your shit from David fucking Wolf, where he's with all the sun energy, with the chocolate and the condensation of the solar energy down, it opens up your chakras. That's what you motherfuckers thrive on. That's how you motherfuckers are getting your money sucked out of you every goddamn day. Because you have no concept of science, and you fucking will believe the dumbest shit, so long as it's consistent with your naturalistic fallacy views. You guys are fucking retarded. Anyway, I guess that's all I have to say about veganism. I'm sorry for the length of this video. I kind of just went off on a rail. But I hope I've made some good points. I hope I've entertained a few people, and, this was actually kind of fun to do. It's Johnny Ringo.